There comes a time in every soul's journey when pain becomes the most honest teacher. Life, in its divine intelligence, does not send wounds to destroy us, but to develop us. The moment you understand that your suffering is not a punishment, but a preparation, you begin to awaken to a higher dimension of purpose. Pain, in its raw form, is the sculptor of character. It chisels away illusions, pride, and dependency until all that remains is truth, the essence of who you were always meant to be. Every wound carries within it a revelation. The broken heart teaches love that cannot be taken away. The loss of something dear teaches gratitude for what remains. The betrayal of a friend teaches self-reliance and discernment. You do not gain wisdom from books alone. You earn it through the experiences that shake you, stretch you, and strip you of pretense. Each scar is a certificate of growth, evidence that you have faced the storms and remained standing when others would have fallen. The wise do not hide their scars, they wear them as medals of honor, each one telling the story of survival and transformation. The truth is, the most powerful individuals in history were not those who lived easy lives. They were those who found meaning in their wounds. They learned that suffering can be a forge in which greatness is refined. When life burns away the superficial layers of comfort, the real strength within you is revealed. That strength does not come from avoidance, but from endurance, from the decision to keep walking even when your soul trembles. To heal is not to erase pain. It is to integrate its lessons into your being so deeply that you no longer fear it. The beginning of healing is the acceptance of what is. Many remain trapped in the prison of, "Why me?" and, "If only," never realizing that those questions bind them to their past. Freedom begins when you ask a different question. What is this experience trying to teach me? In that single shift of perception, you move from resistance to revelation. The energy once spent in regret becomes fuel for renewal. Acceptance does not mean approval of suffering. It means recognizing that the event has occurred and choosing to rise despite it. You cannot rewrite the past, but you can reframe its meaning, and that act alone begins to dissolve its power. When you have endured deep pain and emerged wiser, you hold a sacred responsibility. The world is filled with silent sufferers, searching for a voice that understands. Your story may be the key that unlocks their hope. When you speak from your scars, not your open wounds, you give others permission to heal. Service turns pain into power. It redeems the past by transforming it into purpose. The very trial that once threatened to destroy you can now become the light that guides another out of darkness. That is the divine economy of growth. Nothing is wasted, not even tears. But to reach this stage, the mind must be disciplined. The mind is the workshop of transformation. It can either replay the old story of loss or write a new narrative of victory. Every thought is a seed, and whatever you nurture in thought will grow in your life. When you constantly think about how much you were hurt, you deepen the wound. But when you focus on what you have learned, you elevate your consciousness beyond the event itself. The energy of your focus determines the direction of your healing. It is not circumstances that define you, but the interpretation you give them. Healing with purpose requires a vision greater than your pain. When you discover why you went through what you did, suffering loses its sting. The person who understands their why can endure almost any how. Purpose transforms your past into a platform of wisdom. It lifts you from victimhood to victory, from bitterness to benevolence, from self-pity to self-mastery. You begin to see that life never truly broke you. It broke open something within you. The capacity to love deeper, see clearer, and live more authentically. Your wounds are not signs of weakness. They are portals to wisdom. They remind you that life is not measured by comfort but by growth, not by ease but by endurance. The universe does not choose the strongest to suffer. It makes strong those who suffer with faith. When you turn inward, seek the lesson, and rise with renewed vision, you embody the truth that every wound has a purpose, and every scar can shine. The pain you once cursed becomes the wisdom you shed, becomes a drop of clarity, washing away the illusions of security built on unstable ground. It is in this dismantling that true strength is forged. Mastery arises not from control but from surrender, from trusting that even in the chaos of pain, life is still working for your evolution. Those who understand the wisdom within pain learn to view adversity not as an enemy, but as a mentor. When you are hurt, you are being invited to grow beyond the limits of who you were yesterday. Pain challenges your comfort zones and compels you to expand your consciousness. It whispers lessons that comfort could never teach. Comfort maintains you, pain remakes you. And though the process is rarely pleasant, it is always purposeful. The furnace that feels like punishment is often the very place where your highest potential is being formed. Without those fiery moments of discomfort, you would never discover the depth of your resilience. Each time you rise after a fall, each time you choose perseverance over despair, you fortify the foundation of inner mastery that no external force can destroy. There is a sacred paradox within pain. It breaks you to rebuild you stronger. The more you resist it, the more it controls you. The more you accept it, the more it empowers you. When you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this awakening in me?" you step into the realm of transformation. Pain becomes the catalyst that awakens your inner power, the silent teacher that reveals your capacity to endure and evolve. Through this awareness, you stop identifying with the wound and start identifying with the wisdom it carries. You realize that pain is not a sign of weakness, but a signal of growth, a reminder that your soul is stretching into greater understanding. In the silence after suffering, clarity begins to form. The chaos of emotional storms often clears the path for profound insight. Pain humbles the ego and strengthens the spirit, aligning your priorities with what truly matters. It teaches patience, gratitude, and faith in the unseen workings of life. When you look back at the moments that once shattered you, you begin to see how they built the foundation for your strength, resilience, and purpose. Each painful experience becomes a stepping stone toward higher consciousness, guiding you to mastery over self, not circumstances. Pain is the unseen architect of greatness, and those who embrace its discipline discover that their deepest wounds were not the end of their story, but the beginning of their wisdom. The hidden curriculum of suffering is one of life's most profound and paradoxical teachings. Beneath the surface of every painful experience lies a silent education designed to shape the soul, refine perception, and awaken dormant wisdom. While the world often measures growth by comfort and success, the universe measures it by endurance and understanding. Pain, loss, and disappointment are not random misfortunes, but spiritual classrooms where the lessons of maturity, humility, and resilience are taught. Every challenge carries a hidden syllabus that cannot be found in books or learned through ease. It demands presence, reflection, and faith. Those who dare to face their suffering consciously begin to realize that adversity is not an interruption to their path. It is an initiation into a deeper way of living. Suffering teaches the truths that comfort conceals. When life moves smoothly, the heart often grows complacent and the mind becomes distracted by illusions of control. But when pain enters, those illusions crumble, forcing one to confront reality in its rawest form. It strips away the superficial and reveals what truly matters. Grief teaches the value of love, betrayal teaches discernment, failure teaches humility, loneliness teaches self-reliance. Each form of suffering carries its own unique wisdom. waiting to be uncovered by those who have the courage to look beyond the surface. The hidden curriculum is not about punishment. It is about preparation. It prepares you for greater compassion, for deeper faith, and for a wisdom that only those who have walked through fire can understand. In this divine classroom, suffering becomes the most honest instructor. It does not flatter, it does not sugarcoat, and it does not give lessons you can skip. It challenges every assumption you hold about yourself and the world. It forces you to examine your motives, your attachments, and your beliefs. Many resist this education because it is uncomfortable, but the soul does not evolve through comfort. True understanding is born in struggle, when the outer world collapses, and you are left to listen to the quiet voice within. Suffering, in its mysterious way, reconnects you with your spiritual roots. It teaches you that strength is not found in avoiding pain, but in walking through it with awareness. This awareness turns wounds into wisdom, transforming every hardship into a teacher of truth. There are lessons in suffering that can only be learned through surrender. When one fights against pain, it multiplies. But when one accepts it as a messenger, its meaning begins to unfold. Acceptance does not mean approval of what happened. It means choosing to see beyond the event itself. The mind may say, "This is unfair," but the soul whispers, "This is essential." Each loss, rejection, or heartbreak is a coded message inviting you to grow. Perhaps you are being called to release pride, to forgive, to develop patience, or to rediscover faith. The hidden curriculum is not always visible in the moment, but as time passes and understanding deepens, the pattern emerges. You realize that every suffering had a purpose: to strip away the unnecessary, so that the essential could shine through. The greatest mistake many make is rushing through pain, eager to return to comfort without extracting the lesson. When this happens, life repeats the same lesson in a different form until it is learned. The curriculum of suffering is patient but persistent. It will not promote you to the next level of growth until you have absorbed its wisdom. To truly learn from suffering, one must sit with it, observe it, and ask, what is this trying to teach me about myself, about others, about life? These questions shift the focus from self-pity to self-discovery. Slowly, the pain that once felt meaningless begins to reveal purpose. You start to understand that growth is not about what happens to you, but about what happens within you, because of what happened to you. Suffering also builds empathy, the language of the heart that connects humanity. Those who have endured deep pain often develop a gentler understanding of others. They learn to see beyond appearances, to sense the silent struggles in another's eyes. This is one of the most sacred outcomes of the hidden curriculum. Pain transforms isolation into identification. You no longer see yourself as separate, but as part of a greater human experience. You realize that everyone carries unseen battles, and this awareness makes you kinder, softer, and more patient. Through your own wounds, you learn to honor the wounds of others. What once broke you now becomes the bridge through which you reach others with compassion and wisdom. The hidden curriculum of suffering, therefore, is not a series of cruel tests, but a sacred training ground for the soul. It teaches endurance, patience, gratitude, humility, and faith, virtues that cannot be learned through theory alone. It turns pain into perspective, failure into fuel, and despair into depth. Those who graduate from this curriculum emerge not bitter, but better, not hardened, but healed, not defeated, but defined by their resilience. They understand that the true purpose of suffering is not to destroy, but to deliver. A higher awareness, a deeper love, and a wisdom that endures long after the wounds have faded. Transformation through acceptance begins when the heart ceases to resist what has already occurred. Most suffering does not arise from the events themselves, but from our resistance to them. When pain strikes, the mind often clings to questions like, "Why me?" or "How could this happen?" Yet those questions only deepen the wound, chaining the soul to the past. The power to transform pain lies not in resistance but in recognition. Acceptance is not surrendering to defeat, it is surrendering to understanding. It is the realization that you cannot control every circumstance, but you can control the meaning you assign to it. When you stop fighting against reality, you open the door for healing to begin. Acceptance becomes the soil in which transformation takes root. For only when you make peace with what is can you begin to move toward what can be. Acceptance does not mean you approve of what happened, nor does it mean you forget it. It means you stop allowing the event to define your identity. Many people live imprisoned by their past simply because they have not accepted it. They revisit the same memories, rehearse the same pain, and relive the same story, believing that doing so will somehow change it. But the past is immovable. Only your perception of it is flexible. The moment you accept that the wound cannot be undone, you reclaim your power. You stop being the victim of circumstance and become the architect of meaning. The energy once spent resisting life is redirected toward rebuilding it. Acceptance turns pain from a wall into a doorway, allowing light to enter where bitterness once lived. To accept something fully is to allow yourself to see it clearly. Denial distorts reality, while acceptance reveals truth. Many resist acceptance because it feels like weakness, but in truth, it requires immense strength. It takes courage to face the depth of your own emotions, to look pain in the eye and say, "I see you, and I will learn from you." When you resist, pain controls you. When you accept, you control it. In that moment of acceptance, you begin to see the lesson behind the loss, the wisdom behind the wound. Transformation is the natural result of such awareness, for every experience carries the seed of renewal when met with understanding. The act of acceptance changes the chemistry of your being. What was once chaos begins to settle. What was once anger becomes insight. Acceptance quiets the storm inside you, creating space for clarity. From this stillness emerges strength. Instead of asking why life has been cruel, you begin to ask what life is trying to teach you. Every hardship, when accepted, becomes an opportunity for growth. It teaches patience when life slows you down, resilience when plans fall apart, faith when everything feels uncertain. The soul matures through acceptance, not avoidance. You realize that what you once called a setback was, in truth, a setup for deeper understanding. Transformation through acceptance is also an act of humility. It acknowledges that life operates under a wisdom greater than your own. Sometimes you may not understand why something happened, but acceptance allows you to trust that there is meaning beyond your current comprehension. It shifts your focus from control to cooperation with life. You begin to see that every event, no matter how painful, has played a role in shaping your character. The pieces of your story that once seemed broken start to fit together in a higher design. Acceptance lifts you from self, pity into self-awareness, from despair into direction. It is the bridge between suffering and strength, between confusion and clarity. One of the greatest barriers to healing is the illusion that letting go means losing something. In reality, acceptance does not cause loss. It prevents the loss of your peace. By clinging to what you cannot change, you keep yourself trapped in emotional turmoil. But when you release your grip on the past, you make room for new beginnings. You start to see that life does not take without giving. It simply reshapes what it gives you. Acceptance allows you to evolve instead of erode. It transforms the narrative of your life from one of victimhood to one of victory. You no longer see your pain as meaningless, but as a teacher that revealed your strength and resilience. When acceptance becomes a way of life, you gain mastery over yourself. You stop fearing uncertainty because you understand that every experience, pleasant or painful, has purpose. You no longer seek to control life, you align with it. This shift brings profound peace, for resistance is a battle you can never win, but acceptance is a harmony you can always choose. From that harmony springs transformation, the kind that doesn't just heal the wound, but changes the person who bore it. Acceptance purifies perception, stabilizes emotion, and unlocks the wisdom that pain was sent to deliver. In the quiet that follows acceptance, the soul discovers that even in loss, it has gained something greater: awareness, strength, and the unshakable peace that comes from trusting life's higher design. Turning scars into service is the sacred transformation that occurs when pain is no longer wasted, but redeemed for purpose. Every person who has walked through darkness carries a story that has the potential to illuminate the path for others. What once felt like unbearable suffering can become the very testimony that heals another heart. Scars are not signs of weakness. They are symbols of endurance. They tell the world, I have suffered, but I have survived. Yet, true healing is not complete until the lessons learned from pain are shared to serve others. When you take the wisdom earned from your wounds and use it to uplift someone else, your suffering evolves from personal tragedy into universal contribution. In that moment, your pain ceases to be a prison and becomes a platform. The journey from woundedness to service begins with perspective. When you are still in pain, it is difficult to see beyond your own hurt. But as time passes and understanding deepens, you begin to see meaning in what once felt meaningless. You start to realize that your story, no matter how broken, can give strength to someone else's struggle. What once caused tears can now inspire hope. This is the divine cycle of transformation. Pain leads to healing, and healing leads to purpose. The scar that once embarrassed you becomes the evidence of victory, a reminder that you faced the storm and emerged wiser. When you share your story, you remind others that survival is possible, that healing is real, and that no darkness lasts forever. Scars are the language of empathy. Only those who have suffered can truly understand the silent battles of others. Your scars give you credibility in the classroom of compassion. They allow you to connect with others not through sympathy, but through shared experience. When you have walked through betrayal, you recognize the look of heartbreak in someone's eyes. When you have faced loss, you know how to sit in silence with another grieving soul. Through your scars, you learn to listen without judgment and to speak words that heal rather than harm. The world does not need more perfection. It needs more authenticity. People who are unafraid to show their scars and say, I have been there too. Turning scars into service also breaks the cycle of bitterness. Many remain trapped in resentment because they see their suffering as unfair. But when you begin to use your pain to help others, bitterness loses its grip. Service transforms what was once heavy into something holy. It allows you to reclaim power over your past. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You begin to ask, how can I use this to make a difference? That single shift of focus from self to service changes everything. Your pain gains purpose, your suffering gains significance, and your story gains strength. What once hurt you now helps you, because it is no longer about you. It is about the light your healing brings to others. Those who turn their scars into service often become beacons of hope in a hurting world. They carry within them a quiet authority, the kind that cannot be taught but must be lived. When they speak, their words carry weight because they come from experience, not theory. They become living proof that beauty can rise from brokenness, that grace can grow out of grief. Every act of service becomes an act of redemption. Each time you comfort someone who is in pain, you are honoring your own journey. You are telling your younger, wounded self, your struggle was not in vain. This realization brings deep fulfillment because it gives meaning to what once seemed meaningless. The power of scars lies not only in survival, but in the wisdom they contain. Scars remind you of what you overcame, but they also remind you of what you learned. They teach humility, empathy, and gratitude. They reveal that even in your weakest moments, you were being prepared for something greater. When you use that knowledge to guide others, you elevate your pain to purpose. You become a vessel of healing, a light bearer in a world that desperately needs hope. The energy of your past suffering becomes fuel for transformation. Not only your own, but others. Service becomes the bridge between your wounds and the world's healing. To turn scars into service is to honor both the pain and the purpose. It means refusing to let suffering end with you. Instead of burying your story in shame, you raise it like a banner of victory. You show others that scars do not make you broken. They make you whole. Every person you encourage, every heart you lift, becomes part of the legacy of your healing. The beauty of this transformation is that while you help others heal, you continue to heal yourself. The act of service keeps your heart open, your spirit humble, and your purpose alive. In serving others through your scars, you fulfill one of life's highest callings, to turn personal pain into collective power, and to prove that even from the deepest wounds, wisdom and love can emerge stronger than ever. Reprogramming the mind for growth is the most vital step in transforming wounds into wisdom. Every experience in life passes first through the mind, and it is there that meaning is either created or corrupted. Pain may come from the outside, but suffering is sustained by the thoughts we choose to dwell on. The mind can either become a prison that keeps replaying the past, or a workshop where the raw material of pain is shaped into strength. Growth begins when you decide to take control of your mental narrative, when you stop letting your wounds dictate your thoughts, and start using your thoughts to redefine your wounds. Every person possesses the power to reprogram the mind, to redirect the flow of inner energy away from resentment and toward renewal. The moment you take command of your thoughts, healing begins to accelerate, because your consciousness shifts from victimhood to victory. The mind is a field where seeds of emotion and belief are constantly being planted. If you plant fear, regret, and self-pity, you will harvest bitterness and stagnation. But if you plant faith, gratitude, and resilience, you will harvest wisdom and peace. Pain is often the test that reveals what kind of thoughts dominate your mind. When adversity strikes, the untrained mind replays scenes of defeat, amplifying pain through constant rumination. The disciplined mind, however, pauses and asks, "What can I learn from this?" That single question transforms pain into a teacher rather than a tormentor. To reprogram the mind is to cultivate awareness of your inner dialogue, to catch yourself when your thoughts slip into despair, and to replace them with words of strength and meaning. The process is not instantaneous. It requires daily commitment, repetition, and patience, much like training a muscle. Reprogramming begins with the understanding that the mind cannot hold both gratitude and resentment at once. One must replace the other. When you focus on what was taken from you, you close the door to what can still be given to you. Gratitude reopens that door. It shifts attention from loss to lessons, from pain to potential. The more you train your mind to see blessings, even in hardship, the more you awaken the inner alchemist that turns lead into gold. Each thought becomes an act of creation. As you feed your mind new patterns of hope, faith, and courage, the energy of your being changes. You start to think differently, speak differently, and eventually live differently. Pain no longer controls you because your mind has learned to process it through the lens of growth rather than grievance. The mind is both servant and master. It mirrors what you repeatedly affirm. If you continually tell yourself that you are broken, life will echo that belief back to you. But if you affirm that you are evolving, life will conspire to prove it true. Words are not just sounds, they are frequencies that shape reality. When spoken with conviction, they rewire the subconscious mind. That is why self-talk is so powerful. The inner voice that once criticized you can become the voice that coaches you toward greatness. Each time you choose thoughts of faith over fear, you strengthen the neural pathways that support growth. Slowly, the mind becomes a tool of liberation rather than limitation. You begin to see that your past pain does not predict your future potential, your perception does. A reprogrammed mind does not deny pain, it redefines it. It learns to interpret hardship as a sign of progress, not punishment. Every obstacle becomes an opportunity to develop endurance. Every disappointment becomes a doorway to deeper understanding. This mental shift transforms the way you experience life. You stop reacting to events emotionally and start responding to them intelligently. You realize that nothing outside you has power over you unless you give it permission. The same wound that once made you weak becomes a reminder of how far you've come. The pain that once seemed meaningless now serves as evidence of your resilience. A renewed mind no longer asks, "Why did this happen?" but rather, "What is this preparing me for?" The discipline of reprogramming the mind requires both awareness and repetition. You must train yourself to observe your thoughts as they arise, to challenge their truth, and to consciously choose empowering alternatives. When the mind whispers, "You can't," answer with, "I will." When it replays past mistakes, respond with, "I've learned." The more often you replace self-defeating patterns with constructive ones, the more automatic they become. In time, your mental atmosphere transforms from one of doubt to one of belief. This change in mental climate alters everything: your attitude, your energy, and your ability to attract opportunities that align with your higher purpose. Reprogramming the mind for growth is not a one-time act, but a lifelong practice. Life will continue to test your mindset through new forms of pain and uncertainty, but with each challenge, your awareness will deepen. You will begin to notice how peace follows every moment of surrender, how clarity follows every act of faith. The mind becomes your ally, not your adversary. It no longer amplifies pain, but translates it into purpose. You discover that true healing is not about erasing painful memories, but about changing the way you perceive them. When your thoughts align with truth and resilience, your wounds lose their power to define you. You begin to see life not as something happening to you, but as something unfolding for you. And in that awareness, you achieve mastery, the power to transform every thought, every wound, and every moment into the raw material of growth and wisdom. Purpose as the final healer is the ultimate revelation that emerges after the storm of suffering has passed. Pain without meaning is unbearable, but pain with purpose becomes transformative. When you begin to understand that every wound has been guiding you toward a greater calling, your perspective changes entirely. Purpose gives structure to pain, it turns chaos into clarity. The events that once seemed random or cruel reveal themselves as pieces of a divine design. Every disappointment, delay, and heartbreak was not there to punish you but to prepare you. It is purpose that redeems the past, for once you understand why you endured what you did, every scar becomes sacred. Healing, then, is not merely about feeling better. It is about discovering the deeper meaning behind your suffering and using it to fuel a life of intention. Those who live without purpose often remain trapped in their wounds, circling the same emotions, reliving the same stories, unable to move forward. But when you awaken to purpose, you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin to ask, "How can this serve something greater?" That shift changes everything. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstance, but as a vessel of transformation. Purpose lifts you from self-pity to self-possession. It gives meaning to every moment of pain. When you realize that your trials were training you for a mission beyond yourself, the weight of suffering turns into the strength of service. The pain that once felt senseless becomes the seed of significance. Purpose does not erase pain, it transcends it. It gives it context. The same fire that once burned you now becomes the light that guides your way. Every wound becomes a point of wisdom. Every setback a step in your unfolding destiny. Purpose teaches that nothing in your journey was wasted. Not the tears, not the failures, not even the regrets. They were all teachers, sculpting your soul into the instrument it needed to be. Once you understand this, forgiveness flows more easily, both for yourself and for others, because you see that everything played a role in shaping who you are becoming. Purpose transforms bitterness into gratitude, and gratitude completes the cycle of healing. The moment you discover your purpose, energy begins to return to your life. What once drained you now drives you. You awaken each day with renewed strength, not because the pain has vanished, but because it finally makes sense. Purpose acts like gravity for the soul. It keeps you grounded while pulling you upward. It gives direction to your decisions, focus to your efforts, and meaning to your moments. When you live from purpose, even challenges lose their sting, for you understand that they are refining you for greater capacity. The struggle no longer feels like punishment. It feels like preparation. Purpose heals because it aligns your inner world with the flow of life itself. Finding purpose often begins with looking at where you have been wounded the most. Your greatest pain is usually the birthplace of your greatest contribution. The person who once felt lost now guides others toward clarity. The one who suffered rejection now teaches the value of self-worth. The one who endured loss now brings comfort to those who grieve. This is how purpose redeems pain. It transforms personal suffering into collective service. When you use your story to serve others, your scars become a source of light. Healing reaches its completion, not when the wound disappears, but when it becomes a channel for love, wisdom, and empathy. Purpose is the bridge that turns personal pain into universal healing. Living with purpose also strengthens resilience. It gives you a reason to keep going when circumstances feel unbearable. Those anchored in purpose can withstand storms that would break others because they understand that struggle is part of their shaping. Purpose gives endurance its fuel and faith its reason. It creates a sense of peace, even amid uncertainty, because you know that your life is serving something larger than yourself. The person who walks with purpose walks with power. They are no longer tossed about by external events because their compass points inward, toward meaning rather than outward, toward approval or comfort. Purpose as the final healer also reconnects you to divinity, to the realization that life has always been guiding you, even through pain. Every delay was a detour toward alignment. Every loss was pruning to make space for what was meant to grow. Purpose shows you that nothing in your life was accidental. Everything was intentional. When you begin to live with that awareness, peace flows naturally. You no longer demand explanations from life. You trust its direction. You no longer resist what happens. You respond with wisdom. The wounds that once silenced you now speak through you, carrying a message of endurance and awakening. Healing through purpose is not the absence of pain, but the mastery of meaning. It is realizing that your scars are sacred reminders of how far you've come and how much you still have to give. Purpose turns suffering into a sanctuary of understanding, where the soul finds its reason for being. It gives you the courage to turn outward and lift others, knowing that your story can be the medicine for their pain. and in giving that medicine, your own healing deepens. The more you live for something beyond yourself, the freer you become from the weight of your wounds. In the end, purpose does what time alone cannot. It transforms your pain into power, your past into wisdom, and your wounds into the purest form of healing.